Welcome back. We left off last going over the science of wheelies, and we ended up building a manual machine. But this time, we'll take it a step farther. I'm Wesley, and it's time for the reason part of Rice, Ride, and Reason.
This week, I'm heading out for a 4-day trip to Deep Creek, Maryland, which is just far enough away and long enough stay that I'm going to pack some extra tools, in case the worst happens.
Let's walk through how I prepare for these longer weekends, especially in places that I've never been riding before.
Normally, if I'm riding within an hour of the house and on trails I'm familiar with, I just take what's on my bike. I personally like having tools on my bike and not in my pockets.
I may or may not have spent 20 minutes looking for a multi-tool the other day. And I've been told that I don't open my eyes. Everyone has different versions of their essentials they need to take with them. And essentially, my essentials are everything that keeps me and my group out there on the ride. I definitely carry more on me than the average person, since most people's essentials is just the bike. And that's why I've been known to bring a helmet. Over the years, my on-person toolkit has changed quite a bit. I used to literally take everything under the sun, including personal pruning saws and hand chainsaws. But nowadays, I've kind of separated that into three main groups. The first pack is the within 30 minutes of the house, riding on trails that I'm very familiar with, and I'm only really planning on being out there for an hour to an hour and a half. We'll call this the short and close pack. And honestly, for this, all I really take is what's on my bike, plus a 20-ounce bottle of water.
On my bike, I have this incredibly nifty One-Up Components EDC Light tool system. This is just a tiny multi-tool that stores in the steerer tube. One-Up has a few similar versions that include more features like general storage and a CO2 pump, but those scare me a bit when it comes to the installation, since they require you to thread your steerer tube and use some custom nut to hold it all together. This EDC Light uses your existing star nut. All you have to do is shove it down a bit farther and use a long Allen key to tighten it all back together. This little tool is an absolute lifesaver. It's got all the standard Allen keys, including this weird looking one that's actually an 8mm for pedals. Modern bikes are probably 95% tubeless these days, and any thorn in the tread will generally seal up. But if you get a pinch flat or any hole in the sidewall, you really can't fix those.
Often, mountain bikers will take a tube with them on the trail, just in case they get a flat. But in all honesty, in the last 4 years of riding tubeless, I've never had a flat that warranted needing a tube. Plus, when I got the Bronson, it's actually a mullet, which means the front's a 29 and the rear's a 27.5. So which tube would I take? Well, I decided I'm going to take neither.
When I was carrying a tube, I used the Daykind gripper, but since I'm not going to be carrying one anymore, I changed to this Race Face Stash tool wrap and retired the gripper. In lieu of a tube, I really love this Dynaplug Racer repair tool. In my opinion, it's far superior than regular bacon strips.
You just ram her home and you're all set. The pointy side is for smaller holes, and then the ball end is actually for the larger holes. I don't know what you'd have to do to actually need to use the larger hole. It's pretty big. Well, after that, I just use a CO2 and an air chuck, and I pop that bead on that tire, and you're set to go. The next big item is actually this wolf tooth pack pliers. I absolutely love this thing. It works as a chainring tool. They work as a master link plier set. They also have the bottom where you can use it as a tire lever. Inside, you get some storage for 2 sets of master links. Pro tip, carry an 11-speed and a 12-speed. 11 speeds will work on 12-speed chains, but not the other way around. And the cool flux capacitor looking thingy is actually for valve core removal. My second pack is the riding within an hour of the house, and I'm planning on being out for about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. We'll call this the medium squared.
Realistically, I don't take any more additional tools, but other things that are helpful, like band-aids, new skin, and some zip ties.
And obviously, some one-wipe Charlies. Now, I prefer not to wear a hip pack, but I found out last year that I'm slightly allergic to yellow jackets. So, these days I also carry an EpiPen with me, and having the hip pack is just easier to keep it in. I used to take around this 2-liter Daykind, I think it's called the Hot Laps, and it's great. But I've recently upgraded to the 5-liter version. It actually comes in with an integrated bladder and helps carry around all this GoPro stuff I have to lug around everywhere. The last pack is the I'm riding somewhere unknown that I've never been before, and I really don't know where I'm at. So should I take a compass? Maybe a sextant? I guess I have GPS on my phone, but what happens if I don't have cell service? Yeah, for this one, I really don't bring much extra than before even.
I throw in an actual full multi-tool like this Crank Brothers M19, so I can at least have something that will fix a chain if one breaks. It pretty much has the exact same tools as the EDC Lite, but with more leverage and a few niche ones like a spoke wrench and this Phillips head.
Honestly, why does this thing have a Phillips head? I have never seen one of those. Oh, it's got two. Why does this thing have two Phillips head? I have never seen them on a bike ever. All right. Nowadays, I really prefer CO2. It's just so much faster and more reliable. Plus, it's smaller and easier to pack. I used to carry a hand pump everywhere I went, and I really liked the Crank Brothers Click. But because it mounts underneath the water bottle, it gets wet and muddy. And the super fancy spinny part up top doesn't like to move when it gets a bit of dirt in there. The other thing I just really didn't like about it is that it's got this hose, and it's cool, it's a magnet, but you have to spin it onto your Presta valve. And if you've ever tried to spin on a Presta valve on a mountain bike, it really doesn't work. There's nothing holding the valve stem from turning inside of your rim. And so you basically break your seal and all your sealant comes out. Yeah, it's cool. And it works well if you keep it in a backpack. But CO2 is still a lot faster. For a backpack, I really love the Osprey Raptor. I used to have a Camelback Mule, but I just like the Osprey now.
It has a big bladder for extra water, and the tools have this fancy pouch at the bottom for some storage.
Another big component to this last pack is that I'll be riding someplace pretty far away, or I'm going to be going for multiple days, and it can be hard finding an open bike store. Because of that, I really like taking some extra parts and a few extra tools.
First off, I always take a floor pump if I'm driving there. CO2 can be expensive, and I'm not going to sit on the floor for 30 minutes trying to use a hand pump to pop a bead on a tire. I have never had a floor pump that shows me actual tire pressure. Maybe I use terrible floor pumps, I don't know. But I do use this Toe Peak Smart Gauge, and I think I trust it. It's always different from the floor pump, so one of them is definitely wrong. I'm decently particular about my tire pressure, and I will change it depending on the trail conditions. So having this little button on the side to relieve pressure is amazing. I also take a shock pump. This has come in handy more times than it should, honestly.
Riding in a group inevitably means someone is going to be low on pressure somewhere, and it's small and easy to pack.
I definitely take a full-size chain breaker tool, a pack of hex and torque skis, plus some grease. The last big item I take is this hanger alignment tool. This thing is sweet. It's super fast compared to most hanger alignment tools, and it'll get you back on the trail in no time.
While the straightener tool will work well the first couple of times, you're going to eventually snap that hanger bracket. So having a few extra can really turn a bad weekend into a fun one. Oh, and one thing I don't have but probably should is a rotor truing tool. I put a link for the part tool one below. Now these won't help with the tacoed rotor, but any small bends that you get from riding around on the trails, it'll do wonders and help you get back out. Alright, time for some must-have spare parts for a big trip. The first item, it's definitely a hanger bracket.
I'll also throw in some extra shifter cables, some backup valve stems, maybe an extra master link, and some stem spacers. This is all going to live in a toolbox and not on my back, so the more the merrier. If I've got an extra rotor, I throw that in also. And lastly, I'll bring some backup oil for the brakes, a brake oil cup, some chain lube, and extra tire sealant. I've seriously used all of this on rides before.
Okay, so I know this is a lot, but you're far from home and you don't have quick access to a bike shop. Plus, you've got all the tools right here, so you might as well take them with you, especially if you can spare the room. Okay, so we've figured out what we're going to pack depending on what type of trail and how long we're going out for. But where do you ride, and how do you find those trails to ride on them? For that, I really like using trail forks.
For instance, I know I'm going to Deep Creek Lake State Park, and I can see the mountain biking trails within the park. Selecting a trail gives me this elevation map, explains the difficulty rating, and lets you know if it's directional. Going back out to the first map, it'll have this popular routes section that locals tend to ride, which shows starting and end points. If you're fancier than me, you can send these to a bike computer and get turn-by-turn directions. I like the look of this Deep Creek Enduro. seems to hit all the trails as the sampler does, but has a bit more downhill. So this will probably be my first ride I hit. Now that I'm all packed up, it is time to get on the road and get this weekend started. Thanks for joining. See y'all next time.